Hello everyone and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 95. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I am good. We are a podcast that talks about movies, TV, games, and general pop culture every single week. So please hit like, subscribe, and get us all on the socials and all that type of stuff. So let's just jump straight right into it. Considering world events, and I'm just gonna say it outright because apparently there's a lot of banning of people saying it, but I just don't care. Coronavirus, it's everywhere and it is affecting pretty much, I would say, like lots of parts of the world. And entertainment is not, I would say, clear or safe from this virus. So that's why we can see there's been a lot of cancellations of physical places, conventions, things like that. Things like South by Southwest, which is a really big, I guess, not only entertainment thing, movies and TV shows, but it's really music as well. That's got cancelled. We have, I think there's a few more ones, if I'm not
Yeah, yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. GDC got cancelled as well. That was actually pretty big for like the gaming industry. Like you said, South by Southwest got cancelled. I think, a lot of people were really looking forward to that too. And yeah, just in general, like a lot of other kind of like minor kind of events as well. Like for example, like Minecraft Festival, that's a thing. That got cancelled too. So no more. I don't know if you saw that. Like
Don't worry,
they had
I think I've seen a few memes about the people who attend
yeah,
Minecraft
yeah, like the
Festival.
little kids asking for like additional RAM and stuff. It's hilarious. I love it. And yeah, like and it's obviously been affecting the creation of TV and film as well. Like for example, I think Tom Hanks mentioned that he tested and is positive for the coronavirus. That's obviously halting the filming of the Elvis Presley movie, which I didn't know was a thing until I
Yeah,
found out Tom Hanks had
that's the
the
thing.
coronavirus.
I knew that movie was coming out, but I didn't know Tom Hanks was in it because I know I think they cast in Australia because it's filmed in Australia. And they
Hmm.
filmed in
Oh, that
Australian,
makes
and I think
sense.
Baz Luhrmann's directing it. So Moulin
Ah,
Rouge and
okay,
everything.
yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense why they're there and stuff like that. So yeah, that's gone there. I heard that what is it? The Winter Soldier and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's been
Hmm.
actually delayed
That's correct. Yeah,
because of
yeah, that's
filming as
been
well.
yeah, because they were filming that in Prague, and obviously, they're just concerned about, maybe having getting sick and stuff. Although there is like a bit of like positive news, like like I was mentioning with GDC, like apparently they will stream like some of the like I think panels and talks that they might be having just so they can have something for people to watch. Just because like if it's gonna get cancelled, you might as well try and capitalize on the good faith and trying to put something out there. Riverdale got suspended after somebody on the some production member was in contact with a coronavirus patient. So you see, like all this stuff about self quarantining and stuff really isn't helping. People just don't like to listen. There's been so many cases of people, being told, "Hey, you need to quarantine yourself," and then they proceed to not listen and selfishly get other people infected with the disease, which isn't a death sentence necessarily if you contract it, but that's besides the point. It's after like what, like 2 months, it's finally got a status of a pandemic, which is kind of ridiculous given that
But
I think it was everywhere.
please inform me, like, what's the difference between like an epidemic and a pandemic and all that type of stuff?
So I think specifically an epidemic is just kind of like a widespread, like within like a country or like a region. Whereas like a pandemic refers to like like or just like in general like a community, right? Like it's kind of uncontrolled. Whereas like a pandemic like specifically refers to like a kind of like a worldwide outbreak of the disease, right? Like multiple region, multiple continent, but continents, but like specifically, I think like in the past when we've had pandemics, it used to be on a much smaller scale because we didn't used to be as globalized before.
Mm-hmm.
We
As
didn't we
connected, I
didn't
guess. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, we it wasn't as easy to like just like take a plane over and go to like another country. But because we are more globalized, it does make us more vulnerable to something like a disease outbreak such as this, right? We've had like pandemics like I think it was like the Spanish flu and like the Black Plague and stuff. Like obviously that wasn't worldwide, just because it wasn't on every place at once. But subsequently, it kind of got contained in that area, and subsequently, a lot of people died in those particular outbreaks. We're kind of lucky that we have the technology that we have now. I think the problem is people aren't taking like the proper procedures to either take care of themselves or others. Like here in Australia, we're obviously having like a toilet paper shortage. That's kind of also like in my opinion, I feel like it had like almost like a mimetic effect where people were like laughing about how, oh well, people are hoarding toilet paper, but then it kind of spread to like other Western countries like America, which I think it probably manifested in a way where people are like, hey, people are hoarding toilet paper in Australia. I should hoard toilet paper here before it happens here, and then it subsequently resulted in people hoarding toilet paper
It's a
in other
self-fulfilling
countries,
prophecy,
right? Well, that's what I
well,
mean.
that's it. Probably even happened here because what would have happened, right? It was like some news outlet would have like maybe found like one store and they all were all out of toilet paper, and then that went viral, and then
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
all the
Correct.
news report said, "Look at this store that has no toilet paper," and then
Hmm.
I think that just literally what kickstarted it off, where it's just like
Yeah.
this herd
I mean,
mentality being like, "Wait a second, why? What is there something I don't know about toilet paper?"
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, and it's not the first time that like, the news media has been responsible of causing like either like a countrywide or worldwide panic over something trivial, right? Or something that isn't like end of the world. I think the problem is like, there is like a lack of communication between like governments, including like, the country of origin for this particular pandemic, and just kind of like informing the general public. And obviously that's affecting our media consumption. Again, it is pretty selfish to talk about it in the context of media, but again, this we're here to talk about the
We're talking about entertainment. We
yeah
know
entertainment.
we
Yeah,
don't actually, we're not like experts, I guess. Like we I wouldn't say
yeah.
we're experts, obviously,
Well,
but
yeah.
even then, if you listen to this, I don't think you would be like, "Oh, I want to know about like coronavirus. Tell me more."
Yeah. And of course, there's obviously more authoritative places where you can find out. Always look and check out, what's going on in your local areas and local news to just see what the status of it is. And obviously everybody keeps safe. Like that's what's like the most important thing. But one of the big kind of, speaking of like other big events that kind of got cancelled was E3. Now, I think for a very long time, people, I think the
Electronic
I forget.
Entertainment Expo.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm thinking the ESA. I forget what they stand for, but they're the people who like obviously organize E3 every year, right? And so for a long time, the ESA were like, nah, we're not canceling it. It's still going ahead. We're monitoring the situation closely. And then I think like I forget. I think like maybe like Devolver Studio or maybe like a big or like a indie game studio like tweeted out online yesterday about how fans cancel your E3 tickets, and didn't say why, but obviously you can kind of infer from that information that yes, like it's gonna get cancelled. And then obviously E3 came out and said that it was cancelled. Obviously, again, this is the kind of idiotic thing that I'm kind of seeing out of this whole thing about like all these multinational corporations prioritizing profit over people's safety. Oh well, yeah, if we have like I mean like it's like millions of people kind of pass through E3. Is E3 only over 2 days or is it only the one
It's
day?
over like 4 days, but that's the thing.
4 days.
The
Okay.
press conferences are like before the show technically, and then
Hmm.
it leads into the show, which is like kind of like like a Saturday Sunday type of thing. But yeah, like and yeah, it's this whole encompassing thing. I can completely agree with the cancellation thing because
Yeah.
we could see all these events happening, and it all makes sense, especially in this one because since it's gaming, and if there's like demos, for example, everyone's gonna
Mhm.
be touching controllers or keyboards or whatever it may be, and
Yeah,
that's like way more
bro.
than like, oh yeah, an event where it's like you're listening to music, for example.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, and this is the thing. Like, they would probably have been told, like, you know, this, there is a big concern when all the news about coronavirus was kind of getting all mainstream. And yeah, like obviously they had to do like an assessment over, hey, like, is this worth, the public backlash that would happen over a cancellation. And obviously, I don't think anybody's saying like, oh, boo E3, but they could have canceled it earlier, right? Because people are obviously trying to, they plan flights for this shit, you know,
Yeah, because
and book
E3 is not
hotels.
a cheap thing. Because like they plan, like
No.
I've been a part of like different, I guess, events, cons, behind the scene type of stuff, and all of this stuff really they do plan like pretty much as soon as it ends. I'd say like it's a 10-month cycle, maybe like a 9-month cycle, depending on how big it is. Where like
Mm,
they already pre-book everything in advance, like hotels, like 1 year in advance, more or less, and all the
mm-hmm,
equipment, the safety regulations. If you want to have a booth, the dimensions of the booth, customizations of it. So all that stuff goes into it. The people that are going to there and their hotel costs, flying people over, all the equipment, and even on top of that, you've got stuff of like even the game side. For devs, they're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna make an E3 demo, we're gonna make an E3 demo, and that's like for that's like kind of a thing in the industry where there's a lot of things in E3 demo that isn't real because they kind of
mm-hmm,
rushed it to market. Like an interesting one was I think Halo 2, the first reveal of the Halo 2 demo. That section's not even in the game. They just made it only specifically for E3 or like I think Final Fantasy 13 when they first showed that off. That was like technically a tech demo. They're just like this is a concept of what we want the gameplay to look like, but it's not even
mm-hmm.
gameplay. So
Ah.
it cuts out that as well because yeah, I find that stuff very interesting on like the behind the scenes stuff, and I guess they don't have the rush to have to make game demos and things like that. But I would assume there's going to be some sort of reveal event. Like I think even Microsoft said that they're going to host some sort of event, obviously for themselves, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're like we're going to include extra games that other developers that didn't have weren't part of our show can now be a part of it in a way because essentially an interesting topic of this is just like the real question of do we need E3, and this has been
Mm-hmm.
something that I think people have been talking about in the industry for maybe about 2 to 3 years, ever since kind of Nintendo was like, hey, we're going to be doing our own Nintendo Direct, and see how it goes because Nintendo is always different, and then kind of Sony followed suit last year and also this year.
Hmm. Yeah, look, I think for a lot of things, when it comes to like whether it be video games or entertainment in general, like people often question like the aspect of like having physical, um, I guess like the physical aspect of
Like
having people
physical
go.
presence of like something there, like
Yeah, especially in like a digital world that we live in. Obviously, like, and we've kind of all moved away from that in general. Like, just in general, like with video games, like less and less people are buying games physically. And subsequently, I think we're getting better at counting the numbers when it comes to how many like digital purchases there are. Like it used to be in the past, like, um you wouldn't know, but then you'd also like kind of fold back on that, being like, oh well, our game didn't sell well physically, but we don't know what the but that doesn't include the digital sales, and so people kind of use it as a crutch. We're getting a lot better at showing like, oh, like, a movie has made this much, or a thing has made this much, and like look at our consumption of TV shows now. We've gone from watching it on the TV to watching it through Netflix. We don't need a cable provider, or I guess a TV channel provider. I don't know what the technical term for that is, but we don't we don't need someone else to provide it. We watch it through a different means, and we watch it at our own leisure, without ads, etc. Right? So with something like E3, like yeah, I think it was like they tried to like rebrand themselves like a couple of like early on they were having like kind of exponential growth every year in terms of like how many people would go, and then one particular year they were like, no, we're just going to make it just the um developers or just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
trade or
I think that
business
was
show,
like in
and then
2006, 2007. Because I do
and it's
remember
just like
there was like, if you see footage of E3 2006, 2007, instead of having like a trade show, like as in like in halls and conventions, I think it was in a hotel. And you can
mm,
see like footage of it where it's just kind of like these big hotel spaces and they just have these smaller down booths, I guess. And
mhm.
it's just the game, so you can see like I don't know, like Super Mario Galaxy being played or something like that. So yeah, they have tried
Yeah,
to kind
like
of cater to that. And they did that for like 1 year, but then they're like, nah, we like the spectacle. This is not really working for us. And
well that
for the past like I don't know, like 10 years, it's kind of been going that way until Nintendo's like, you know what, we don't want to spend the money like coming out here,
yeah
doing all this stuff, because not only that, but doing like live stage demos as well. That's why a lot of the demos that you see are pre-recorded anyways, because there's not many people actually playing the
mm,
games live in front of your face anymore, because it always seems to have some sort of technical issue. That's why a lot of the gameplay that you do see, and it's actually really smart how they cut it, because you don't really see the stage when all the gameplay is happening,
mm,
because which I would assume it's just all it's a pre-made thing where there's like audio and kind of a thing going on, so it's already pre-gameplay. So what's the you can easily move that into a digital format then, instead of having people physically being on a stage in presence of other people. And I
mm.
think
Well, I
that's
mean,
that's why everyone's like, okay, it makes sense.
well, yeah, like, well, I've got the some of the attendance numbers right now. So E3 1995, which was the first E3, had 50,000 people attending, and it kind of like more or less kind of kept that. Like some years it was like 37, another year it's like in the 60s, 70s, but it was more or less like kind of growing up until 2007 when they limited the public participation and focused more on media and retail attendees. And then in 2008, only 5,000 people attended. And it was the lowest E3 attendance record. And then subsequently, in the following year, they returned to the original format, allowing additional game developers, professionals access to the additional, in addition to media and retailers. So I think, essentially they were like, hey, you know what, we're not going to just let it be just Nintendo's, Microsoft and Sony just do their thing. Um, and it's kind of funny, like on the list it has like presenters, and in the first show it's like Nintendo, Sega, and Sony. So it's kind of funny, back when Sega used to be like I guess, had a fighting chance, which it no longer does,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and I'm very curious, and I want to see if I want to know if it's on the list. But like
Mm.
you always used to kind of be the big three, but then obviously you always had like EA, Ubisoft at some point started to join the game, and then you had
Yeah,
weird
so that
people
was
like like Konami, and then I think everyone knows about the memes of the 2 or 3 Konami press conferences where it's an absolute shit show, but it's kind of funny to watch.
well
And
that
there's that,
started
and
that
then even
start
like Bethesda, for some reason, like where everyone's like, Bethesda, what's going on? Obviously, Fallout 4 was getting announced and came on, but like for 3 years onwards, they've kind of kept kind of the momentum going with Bethesda, just showing like how much stuff they actually have.
well, yeah, so EA and Ubisoft began in 2010. That's when they started to have, like, I guess, like presentations, like major presentations. And then Bethesda's first kind of appearance was in 2015. And then obviously, there's like Oculus and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of getting like bigger over time. Um, but obviously, there might be some kind of, I guess, like a digital event that they might just have instead, just so they can kind of be, like just presented on Twitch or presented on or simulcast it on like YouTube and have like a bunch of people just watch it together. You know what I mean? That'd be pretty cool. It'd make it more interesting, but like also, it also allows for more cringe. That's what I mean. Like I love cringe compilations of all these like kind of major events, and seeing people try to be like relatable and hip is always hilarious to me.
Yes. Like I think there was Mr. Caffeine for Ubisoft at like 3 or 4 years ago. I think there was even just recently at the Video Game Awards, like Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez talking about like their new Fast and Furious game, and he's like, "We're in the right crowd," and it's just like this very awkward thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, guys, but okay, Fast and Furious game. We're
Oh yeah, exactly, right? Like what a joke.
yeah. So there is
Um,
stuff like that, but yeah, like as mentioned, like it seems to be like, yeah, if Sony wasn't going this year and they didn't go last year as well, So it's kind of like okay, and then Microsoft kind of had its own kind of
I
stage,
think.
and then
Hmm,
now Microsoft just kept it going, but especially with the dawn of the new console generation, which is like basically this year, unless they of course they delay it because manufacturing is
yeah,
done in China as well. So
exactly. I think it's. I think it's going to be delayed. Whether it's delayed, like I think they were already going to make it a like kind of Christmas release for all these kind of things. So like they're going to delay it completely and be like, hey, you know what? We won't be able to make it to Christmas. Maybe they'll like shift it over to like next quarter or
or
something.
or or
You
what I
know,
just or what I just remembered,
mm,
because I think a lot of people don't remember, I guess consoles back in the day, where I don't know if you would probably remember, but I do remember there was a shortage at some point of consoles when they first launched. That's why there was pre-orders and that's why they sold out. Like I do remember I remember PlayStation 3
yeah.
selling out for or especially like Wii's. Wii sold out for a whole year. You'd have to get that lay by that stuff like 6 months in advance. I think even remember like
But I think with
yeah.
something like the Wii, nobody, no, I don't think not even Nintendo expected that their console was going to be that successful. Um, that it would like require like the construction of like additional Wii like consoles. Like they kind of came off GameCube and like what the fuck was that, right? Like
It's
they
got a
kind of slowly
handle.
figured out. Yeah, like they kind of figured out like, oh yeah, people don't have three hands anymore, but like the controller was kind of weird and the games were actually
No,
okay,
the
but it
games are
wasn't
really
like
good.
anything.
They had deals
Yeah,
with Capcom, said Resident Evil 4,
but it
Beautiful
wasn't.
Joe Okami originally was there.
But I think everybody can say that like the GameCube wasn't that great as a console, and it wasn't like their most powerful and like kind of versatile console, right? And that's where the Wii came in. It was like a versatile console. It played a lot. It made had a lot of great games. A lot of great games came out at like the appropriate time. And it also had like a cool kind of physical function, right?
Mm.
Wii U kind of obviously did bad because they tried to like almost replicate what they did with the Wii and be like have like a Wii. It was kind of like the proto Switch, right? That's what I kind of see it as. It was like their attempt to try and have a Switch like, um, you know, device, but still tethered to a kind of a physical console. But then they kind of perfected that with like the Switch because the Switch is essentially the tablet itself of a Wii U, but it also is the console itself that then transformed into the console if you connect it to the docking device.
Yeah,
So
because I
it
do
was
remember
everything.
everyone's like, oh, can I take it with you? And it's just like, yeah, nah, it's only like a certain meter range or whatever it was.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
and
like it,
it was stupid. Like, and subsequently, that's why it did so badly.
and that's why
Um,
you would say that's why the Switch is done so well. It's because like it fully, I guess, got that
yeah,
promise of like this is fully portable, but on top of that, it still can be a console, and that's
yeah. I mean,
that's
like,
success.
yeah. I mean, my first console was like a Nintendo 64, and then I got an Xbox, and then like a GameCube. But only like I only bought a GameCube kind of like after after it got all cheap and I can play these games for pretty cheap because I can get like a console secondhand online and stuff. But then subsequently, like I didn't buy a Wii, I didn't buy a Wii U, but then like when I saw the Switch, I was like, yeah, Switch looks fucking dope. um and yeah, and it's been pretty great. Like I'm basically I've to be fair, I really need to finish Breath of the Wild. I like found everything, but I'm like kind of like, ugh,
It's one
I
of
don't
those
want
games
to.
where it's just like, yeah, like I
I
remember,
just need to finish.
yeah,
No, it happens to me all the time where it's like, oh, it's the boss, and then like I won't play a game for ages, and then I'll be like, oh well, now that it's been ages, I have to play the game from the beginning. You know what I mean? It's one of those kind of things. I really just need to sit down and beat Ganon, that fucking piece of shit, and
keeps it coming
anything.
back.
But yeah, like oh yeah, speaking of which, there have been rumors at E3 about certain games coming out too. But these are just rumors at the moment, mind you. So it's not completely confirmed. But
But let's
apparently
be
there's like,
honest, it probably
yeah,
is
it's
a
probably
sure
is.
bet.
Yeah. There's like a Harry Potter game that was coming out. I don't know how that would work because
Well,
I'm
that's the
not a
thing.
big Harry
I
Potter
know about this
person.
game because this was leaked like a year, 2 years ago, and there was like
Mm.
footage of it, and it just like disappeared from the internet, but it's 100% like a real thing. From what it
Yeah,
looked
I
like,
think I
it
know.
looked like, yeah, it was just a third person action RPG. Obviously skill trees, and you get to customize your own character and all that stuff, and it looks pretty cool. So I think like the Harry Potter crowd, they're always hungry for stuff, and they just eat all that stuff up. And I think like it'd be it is kind of cool to have it like, yeah, because it would be like, for example, like Jedi Fallen Order, for example, just instead of Star
But
Wars,
with
it's
Harry
Harry
Potter.
Potter, and that's
Mm.
basically what it would probably be like. And yeah, I can see it, because you got to remember, like Warner Brothers owns that license. It's a pretty big license, and they really haven't done anything big for the games aside from like the Lego games. So I guess this is
Yeah,
a
and
great way to do it.
honestly, they'd probably have a better idea what to do with the franchise than J.K. Rowling at this stage.
Yeah, pretty much. Well,
Um,
yeah, or even I just remembered, Warner Brothers also owns like, yeah, the Lord of the Rings thing, so that's why the Shadow of Mordor games. That's basically what it might
mhm.
probably be like, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking of which, like, there's also a new Batman game. Now, we've obviously been talking about the Batman game, over on the podcast for like, here and there when we hear like a bit of a sprinkle of news. But yeah, apparently that they were gonna premiere it at this E3, which is obviously awful that they can't. But I wonder, like, if that means that, was it going to have like a release this year, or was it going to have a release next year? I kind of like the Bethesda style of releasing a game, which is Bethesda says, "Hey, we're releasing a game," and then like in like maybe 1 or 2 months, the game is out. I think they did that for like Fallout 4, and I think maybe they did that for 76, but I can't confirm
Yeah,
that. I know
76.
definitely
I
they did
think
it.
76 was, yeah, it was basically that year, and same with Fallout 4. Yeah, I totally agree, and I guess like it depends on like the marketing people, and like they probably have stats of like what happens if we announce a game, I don't know, like 2 years in advance versus 1 year in advance versus the year that it comes out, because it's all
Mm,
about like hype cycles. So it's like
yeah,
you don't want to be, but that's the thing, you don't want to announce something and then the next year there's no news about it,
no
and then
news
it
about it.
disappears, and then the third year comes out. I think,
Well,
especially like Sony is like probably the worst when it comes to that stuff, because like I knew about that Spider-Man game, the Ghost of Tsushima game that's still not out yet. um
mm,
the Last of Us 2, like all like old Neo, like all these games that they had in this current generation PlayStation 4 were like at least at E3 for like 3 years. And they were kind of just riding on the hype of that, I guess. But it's like, I do prefer, hey, the game's coming out now, rather than, because that's the thing. It's like, if you look at what Microsoft did, for example, a game that I was hyped about is Scalebound, the one where it's like a third-person action game, looks very Devil May Cry. It's got like dragons
hmm
on it. That got
Oh, the
cancelled.
one that got cancelled? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm like, oh yeah, if you didn't show me until it was ready, then I wouldn't know about it, and it'd be a lot more better, in a way.
Mm, yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. I think the difference is like, with something like those games that are in development, there is obviously that kind of thing about, oh, it might get cancelled or something might, I think Scalebound is probably like one of those like exceptions. Like they were probably very confident of this game coming out, and then Microsoft pulled the plug on it. Whereas something like Batman's definitely coming out. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
That
because
there's going to be a Batman
I've
game
talked
coming
that
out.
so long. Rocksteady has not done one thing since like Arkham Knight. Well, technically they did that VR game for PlayStation VR, but that doesn't really count. But still, it's like one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like, this studio has not done anything for a long time, so clearly they're doing something. And there's obviously probably going to be if I thought Justice League game, Suicide Squad game, Superman
Well,
game.
I'm. Well, are they doing the Batman game?
I would assume so. If they're not doing it, then it's like what the Warner Brothers studio is doing
Yeah,
it.
that's what I actually assumed. I just assumed that.
But then what the hell's Rocksteady still doing? No one's answered
I
this
don't know.
question.
Maybe they're the one doing the Harry Potter game.
Who knows? Because that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, because if you think about the development cycle, yeah, like how much money do
Mm,
they have that they have to wait to make a product? There's only so few, I guess, studios out there that can do that. Bethesda
mm.
technically can do that, where they can literally take a break for like literally 6 years and still make money. But there's a few develop, or like Rockstar, like they literally don't have to make a game for the rest of their lives, or like
Yeah, but they
if they,
also
but
monetized the shit out of GTA.
yeah,
That
that
was
is true. But even in general, even if just by sales units alone, they can literally make one game every 10 years, and they'll still make
mhm.
profit. It's but like that's why we saw the collapse of something like the Bioshock games from 2K. Whilst they were relatively successful, they didn't have that longevity where it's like, okay, people can keep on buying this thing, and the development cost versus the time it makes to make a, I guess, Bioshock type game, it didn't work out, and that's why 2K was like, yeah, can't have that this genre, and that's why they kind of pulled the plug on the Irrational games.
Hmm. and and yeah, and this is the thing, like, obviously, these are kind of like the big games that are gonna be announced. I think the bigger issue when you have these kind of cancellations of E3 and stuff is that it hurts a lot of like indie game studios because they're obviously not going to be. They use like E3 as like a launching point. Like, they're going to release their game, and a lot of eyeballs are looking at E3, and that's going to get them to go on Steam or go on like the Nintendo eShop and get that game. Whereas, when they don't have that, then they're just like kind of hoping that their social media and word of mouth gets it out there that, oh, hey, we're releasing, I don't know, Cooking Mama 10 or some shit. I don't know, Cooking Mama's not an indie
Yeah,
title.
I know what you mean. Like, of course they have
Yeah.
PAX, and like hopefully PAX doesn't get canceled as well, because PAX is very much more independent indie game
I think
developer.
I think it'll probably when's packed.
Well, I think for the US, it's like maybe like August onwards type of thing. So it just really depends on how
Maybe
this
it's
stuff
got
goes on,
time.
and
Yeah,
then like
well,
we
but
get
that's the
later.
thing. Like, ultimately, I think a lot of these companies have to look at, like, be responsible. Like, to be fair, right? Like, at a lot of conventions, like, people are fucking gross, man. Like, I'm just putting it out there. People
Hey,
are
I've been
fucking
to a
gross.
lot of cons, man. I can completely agree.
Yeah, and like that's me being really nice about it, right? Like, people really don't like it's like a stare. It's like that kind of gamer stereotype where, like, people don't like don't leave their rooms and they don't bathe and shit. And fucking rank. And then, like, then you're also gonna have a like kind of convention where, maybe obviously not everybody's like that, but then there are odd people who aren't like kind of prioritizing their hygiene, and then on top of having the coronavirus, it's really bad optics. But
Especially
but
yeah, because the whole problem is if the event goes ahead and one person gets infected, and then they're at the thing, and then other people get infected,
yeah,
the brand name just dies, and
yeah.
that would be really bad, and then there'll probably be some sort of lawsuit, yada yada yada. I
Mm.
think even just E3 alone, and even without this virus, we still got to think of like as we were talking about before, bringing it back. Is E3? It's pretty much at its death throes, pretty much, right? Like,
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, I mean, Nintendo have been doing their Nintendo Direct stuff, which is, when they'll just get like one of their, the Japanese people will just come up and just be like, oh, hey, we're releasing this game and it's coming out in a couple of months, here's a preview of it. Hey, isn't this cool? All right, cool. It's coming out, soon. See you on the next thing. Like, that's all you need. That's all you need. And everybody likes it because it's really cute. It's got like it just it doesn't have like all the advertisements. It doesn't have like people just kind of trying to be like super funny, except for the one with like that Doug Bowser president guy that was pretty funny. But that's
but
what
that's
I'm
the thing.
saying. Like,
Nintendo has its own charm when it does that stuff. It's only when you
yeah,
try. I think it's only when you try too hard that it's like,
yeah.
just please stop.
Yeah, well, and that's what I mean. Like, it just, I think with all the Nintendo Direct stuff, it's straight to the point. It's none of this fluff. There's no like, they're not trying to drag it out. They're not trying to put like advertisements everywhere. It's just, okay, these are the facts. It's kind of like what you want from your news, right? You don't want them to tell you the top five things to be that are more deadlier than coronavirus. You want to just know about coronavirus, and that's it, right? And yeah, with something like Nintendo Directs, they have obviously kind of learned like, hey, we kind of don't need E3. We can just do our own things and get like millions of views and get monetized for it, right? Like, that's obviously going to be the best way for them to go about things. So I wouldn't be surprised if, more kind of gaming conventions, well, things like E3 kind of, move to the side where, and while like, something like Sony and Microsoft just have their own conference, right? Like, it's probably much cheaper just to hire out a hall, like at a private hall, and have just a bunch of people come there and just exclusively look at your shit rather than everyone else's,
Yeah,
right?
because you get that 100% focus on your product and your things, and it's like that's what you kind of also buy as well. Where it's like, okay, the media message is all on you,
Mm.
So at that point with E3, you kind of had to spread out the different gaming news, and it'd just be like a whole lot. It could be we can very much spread out the gaming news throughout the year instead of having this big explosion of stuff. Then it dies down for like 2 or 3 months.
And I think that's the thing, right? Like, obviously responsibility of like kind of organizing and doing the logistic stuff that something like Microsoft and Sony kind of maybe don't want to deal with, and that's what E3 kind of provides, right? But I think ultimately, they'll be able to handle it, and it'll ultimately be better for consumers because there's going to just be multiple kind of info dumps on certain news, and that will also allow companies to like gain the limelight at X particular time. Like, Microsoft's going to have their announcements, and then Sony's going to have their announcement. And so they don't have to like compete with each other necessarily on the same days for the same like eyes and ears. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be what's going to come out. Whether it like completely dies, that'll remain to be seen. But I think this is kind of like, at least the beginning of the end, if it's not the end.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to the Batman game because uh, I love Batman, and yeah, Rocksteady. If they are making it, they're taking their sweet time, which means hopefully that it's really good. There's obviously been all the rumors about, oh, it's obviously it's going to be like a reboot. It's going to have like the Court of Owls in it. I hope if they are doing like a reboot, that means that they're going to have like a almost like kind of like a reboot of all the characters as well, because like Dick Grayson's obviously different in this. I think he dies
Well,
actually
that's the thing.
in
The
like
way
the VR
the
game.
way the I guess the Arkham universe kind of left off, it's kind of like okay, then like it's very much like it feels like a complete story almost. So
Exactly,
that's why I
right.
think you have to kind of drop the Arkham name per se and call it something else or do something else with it, and then like
Mm,
kind of semi reboot it where the characters might not be at their prime as of yet, or certain events didn't happen, and it's set in a certain
mm.
time period. I think that's the
Yeah,
best way to
it
go.
and I think the more interesting thing as well is like how they're going to be able, like, are they just going to be setting it in Gotham again? Like, is it because like like Arkham City is kind of like that thing where, oh well, we're going to just have access to everything now. You have access to all of the islands, all of the thing, all of the places. So you explored all of you know Gotham in that particular game. Is it going to be just like a reimagined version of Gotham? Because obviously, I think they even said that when they were designing the game, they made like the streets wider because, like the Batmobile and just like driving around with it wasn't as intuitive as it would be like in real life, because you'd have to be a lot more accurate and you just like run over cars and stuff a lot more easier. So it'd be interesting if that means that maybe they'll take that into account and then make like buildings bigger because they're going to have a lot more room to play around with like exactly how big things are. So maybe Gotham itself is bigger and maybe they get to do cool storylines. I want to see the Court of Owls stuff done because that's probably one of the best storylines coming out of the I guess the new 52 genre of like stories from the Batman universe. Any particular stories you'd like to see coming out of Batman going forward?
I think yeah, as you mentioned before, I think that the best one would probably be Court of Owls because it also kind of with the Court of Owls, it's not really just one person; it's a whole group of individuals, and on top of that,
Mhm.
um, I guess they're steeped in Gotham lore because the whole thing is like yeah, they've been around for generations type of thing, and I think like it would be kind of cool to learn more about I guess Gotham instead of just being a
Mhm.
place and kind of having a thing. You can really have this
And the
intricate thing where it's like you actually learn more about Gotham, who established whatever. Like this tower was erected. Thomas Wayne did it 50 years ago type of thing or something like that. It'd be really
yeah,
cool to have something that's like kind
and
of like oh yeah, I'm learning more about the world.
yeah, and I think also it kind of allows for because it is also kind of intertwined with like Dick Grayson as well. So maybe that'll give you the opportunity to be like, oh, well, play as Dick Grayson for this mission. Like it'll be interesting to see if it's not just like Batman centric, if that makes sense, right? Like, hopefully maybe they'll give time to be like, oh well, we're also gonna look at like Nightwing, and we're gonna look at Robin, but maybe maybe they're gonna introduce Damian Wayne in this game, or maybe they're gonna introduce like Cassandra Cain. Like it'll be interesting to see them just kind of like expand the roster and then also give the ability to look at different characters and play as them in the game. Because I think that's probably the only way that you're going to be able to freshen up the the gameplay system is giving people a different play style to play as, and kind of like how you had the Red Hood DLC in Arkham Knight, like that kind of gave like a bit of a different fighting style and to play as. So I'm looking forward to that. Another thing that got announced recently was Horizon Zero Dawn officially confirmed for PC during like a PlayStation blog. Basically one of the I think it was like the creators basically just mentioned like it is coming out on PC this summer, which means our winter. So I guess like
in a few
maybe
months.
June, yeah,
In a few
June-ish.
months.
Yeah,
The real funny part about this is I think we knew about it for a while because I think it was like leaked probably about a month ago. I think Amazon did it. I think it's always Amazon.
is
There's
that
always
with
some sort of
Amazon or
Amazon
some
listing.
shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
we mentioned it on the show. We mentioned it on the show, and I was kind of happy just because it just meant that I didn't need to buy a PlayStation in order to play this game. And I think, it's a good sign towards like, all these kind of console companies kind of being like, hey, you know what, we're not gonna deal with this whole, uh, exclusivity thing per se on our consoles. We're just going to make it that exclusive on our particular systems, and that you just play it off like kind of like a game for service, right? Like a Netflix for video games. So it's going to be like the PlayStation service or the Xbox service, which I think that's where Xbox is kind of like moving towards, and I think all of them are kind of moving towards. Just Xbox has the best infrastructure for it because of the X Cloud and their cloud tech.
Hmm.
Obviously they're competing alongside something like Google Stadia, but that's been doing really bad. I think one of the big news that came out with that is like Doom Eternal. They said would be streaming at like 4K, but it's only like 4K. I don't know. It's not real 4K essentially.
it's
It's like
like it's that fake 4K.
yeah,
I
fake 4K. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there is that fake 4K, but yeah, it is very interesting. I think what Sony's doing is they're probably dipping their toes in the water a bit because I think they still rely on the hey, we're gonna keep the exclusive thing kind of going. I think that's
Mhm.
what they're gonna do because you're gonna remember Sony's physical hardware company, uh, and they don't really sell a service per se. They don't really sell many things. Well, like Microsoft sells like Windows 10 and all these type of things. So it's like I feel like Sony still is like we need the hardware going. But I still
Mhm.
think like they're probably testing the waters with this one game, and they're just like, look, if this game goes really well, and we can see profit like rise, where it's like basically sales for Horizon Zero Dawn on a PlayStation 4 are pretty much dead. Like the only
Mhm.
people who will pick up the game if when they randomly buy a PlayStation, and that's kind of really it. And it's like so I
Sure.
feel like they've probably seen the sales decrease, so they're just kind of like okay, if we see the uptick in the sales, putting in sales, and gives this game a new life, then we could probably do it to the rest of our other games, and maybe it'll be like a 2 year, 3 year cycle, or it could even just be a
Yeah.
1 year cycle of
One
games.
year cycle. I mean that's what Rockstar does with their games, right? Like Rockstar, released I think what is it, Red Dead Redemption 2, in 2018, late 2018, and then they released it in uh early 2019 or something like that. Sorry, late 2019, whatever it may be. Anyway, the point is, released it a year later, and part of it was because, yeah, they kind of know that the PC community is gonna obviously fuck with it or pirate it or whatever it may be, and so that's what they're um, kind of taking into account of when they're releasing it. So I'm kind of okay with that. I'm kind of okay with like quality games coming out for the PC a year later because there's more than enough PC games for me to play in the meantime,
There's way
right?
too many, you would say.
Way too many, almost way too many. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still got a backlog of games, let alone TV shows to catch up on, which I think is a great segue towards our next topic, which is what we've seen today. So, or well, I guess this week, so to speak. So, you've been watching something called Devs, correct?
Yes, I've been highly anticipating this show, just because of the people involved with the show, which is Alex Garland, He wrote Sunshine. He wrote Ex Machina and Annihilation. He also directed them as well. So I'd say pretty high pedigree. I know we kind of have some problems with Annihilation, and that's definitely not his best work, that's for sure. But I do prefer Ex Machina. I think that kind of put him on the map. That for most people, I guess, because like
Mm-hmm.
I think for most people, like, you know, he wrote 28 Days Later and all that type of stuff, but I don't think um it didn't hit that mass appeal until really Ex Machina came out, and it was like, okay, what's the deal with this thing? But yeah, Devs is his new show, and obviously like everything with Alex Garland, it's something got to do with science fiction, whether it be robots or, you know, aliens and things like that. So Devs kind of focuses on, I guess, a Silicon Valley type company. You know, so basically a social media type company that does tech and things like that as well. Very much like Google, you would say. Like Google has a very extensive like R&D development division, as
Mm-hmm.
well as not only just doing, you know, Google searches or whatever it may be. Um, but essentially, the show follows an engineer. He gets accepted to the devs program, which is this highly coveted area. And then all of a sudden, he mysteriously goes missing, and there's videotape showing him that he committed suicide. And obviously, that is definitely not the case. So the whole thing is this mystery of her girlfriend's, you know, sad about his loss and just trying to be like, okay, what's going on? Because clearly, and she's trying to unravel this whole mystery of like, clearly he didn't commit suicide. There's a lot more things going on. And there's only been 3 episodes released, and I'll only really talk. This is kind of my first impressions. And I'd say it's a pretty good, solid show where it has a pretty good, I guess, mystery that's going on. You know, it like I was kind of talking to other people before where I'm like, this could be the next, I guess, Westworld if it pulls off its mystery correctly, and what it's trying to do. So, you know, it's got a really amazing acting. Nick Offerman, the guy from Parks and Rec, being a very comedic genius when it comes to timing. He's kind of like the tech startup guy. And then we've got like relatively unknowns in the cast, which is really good. And yeah, just so far it's just seeing the girlfriend trying to go to the company, being like, "Hey, what actually happened to my boyfriend?" And then only just in the recent episode they found kind of a semi clue of what's going on because something's happened. But there's all this different stuff, and I don't think it's really spoilers because it's like basically in the first episode. You know, basically the boyfriend was a sleeper agent for Russian intelligence. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this storyline, and there's all this type of stuff going on where essentially the devs program, what they're focusing on is a prediction algorithm. Um, and essentially what it kind of looks like it's kind of hinting at is that, you know, they show a scene of like for example, like uh, the scene where Jesus was crucified. So then it kind of shows this kind of Assassin's Creed animus type of thing where you can see other events previously what happened in the world, for having this kind of prediction database, or these things, or even the most recent episode they're just like, this is an early concept of, you know, we have Marilyn Monroe's sex tape, for example. So that it's kind of this semi fake history, real, is it true type of thing going on. But you know, from the get go, I don't know if it's me being smart or the show's trying to pretend that it's smart, and then later on will trick me being not smart. Is that, you know, the posters for it, the symbolism for the show is this girl. Now, clearly, this girl is probably Nick Offerman's, basically the tech CEO's probably daughter, and probably got killed at some point. So he basically just wants to relive, like, wants to create this this prediction algorithm to be like, if my daughter didn't die, can I live in this thing and see her whole life of what it would have been like? That's where I
Mm.
assume the show is going.
Okay, damn, you already just figured out the plot. Now I don't need to watch it. Is that what
Well,
you're
that's the thing.
telling me?
I think I would think so, but it's so obvious. But I'm not quite sure if it's they're trying to trick me, being like, this is
Mm-hmm.
going on, but really there's something else going on. So that's why I kind of want to watch it. But I would assume this is what the plot's all about. But you know, I really enjoy the show. I think a lot of people, they might find it a little bit slow at times, but you know, I'm interested in the, I guess, the development side of things, as well as kind of like what's going on with the, you know, the Russian sleeper agent. You know, how far is a tech company going to go to they keep their secrets of what they're working on, type of thing. So
Hmm.
overall, I think like I so far I'm really enjoying the show. 3 episodes are only out at the current moment. And we'll see how it goes. Like it really could fall apart at the later episodes, but so far it's kept me entertained.
Okay, interesting. Just as a side note, I forgot to mention this because this was actually on a talking list, but I don't know if you heard about how the Star Wars novelization came out recently. Um,
I did hear that.
yeah, yeah, and so it kind of revealed a bunch of things, right? So we'll kind of go like bit by bit in terms of what it revealed. One of the first things that it revealed was Finn's big secret. So what is that thing that he was trying to tell Rey the entire time throughout the movie, right? Like a lot of people obviously kind of thought because the vibes that were happening between her and Ray and Finn during like I think episode 7, that he might have had like a crush or a romantic interest, but apparently according to the novel, it's implied, or sorry, it's just straight up said that he was trying to tell Ray that he could feel the Force,
But that's
and
the thing.
that's it.
I think I do remember some sort of rumor where JJ said, "Oh yeah, what he was saying is like he's attuned with the Force." So that one isn't
Yeah,
too much of a big surprise. But
yeah, but
still,
it's so
the way
dumb.
seriously, the way it's kind of framed in episode 9 is very much like a romantic thing. But on
Mm.
top of all that, um, I feel like that storyline is like a remnant of episode 7 type of thing, like early script drafts. Because I think what they were planning to do, the original early stages of episode 7, is being like, hey, Finn's also a Force user and he's going to help Ray, or they might even be competing against each other, or something like that. I
Yeah,
felt
or
like
maybe you
I
could have
think
just had
and that's what I think the original plan was at some point. One of the scripts was,
maybe
and then you can clearly see from like
when
episode.
When Ryan Johnson came around.
Yeah, pretty much. But you can
Things.
clearly say from episode kind of 8, kind of cut that off, and then episode 9, they're just like, oh shit, what do we do with
I don't
Finn?
know. I
What
don't.
do we? And that's what we kept on saying back and forth. Like Finn is useless, and it's
Well,
purely
I mean,
because he was built to be like, okay, he's gonna have Jedi power, he's gonna be doing something, but he doesn't have any
I
of that.
don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think um Finn was basically supposed to be a red herring, and I fucking called it like immediately when I watched like before I saw 7, because seeing all the marketing and seeing it all focused on Finn, I just knew that he wasn't the main character. Like he was just like a bait and switch to get people, which is kind of weird because obviously like Disney promotes this stuff in China, and China hates black people, so it's kind of weird for them to like put him front and center. I think like in the poster for China, it's like completely different than the one in the West, right? But with something like the episode 7 movie poster, like it has him holding the lightsaber and Rey just holding her stuff. But I kind of knew no, the story's going to be about Rey, and so it's going to be like, oh, you think he's got force powers, but no, it's really Rey who has the force powers, and that's what it ended up being, and it ended up being a boring movie anyway.
It
In
basically destroyed Star Wars, sir.
oh yeah, single-handedly, Kathleen Kennedy's been doing an awful job, and continuing with the again, this isn't too bad of news. It's just one of those things that was like, oh, this is kind of important, but we didn't explain it in the movie. So the I think it's Jana, who is the kind of I guess Stormcruiser deserter that like Finn and them meet up with. She's kind of confirmed to be Lando Calrissian's like long lost daughter. And yeah, like apparently that there's like a couple of like scenes and context clues that were supposed to be in the movie, but they're in the novel. But it was missing because I think obviously they cut out a lot of the stuff in the film. So yeah, that's something else that was like kind of weird, but they didn't,
Yeah,
mention it
because
going
that's why at the
forward.
end where it's like, yeah, let's see where you're from, and there was that whole thing of like, even what's the point of having Lander? And he's like, he was at that desert planet at the start of the movie, and
Hmm.
apparently there was a scene cut where it's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to find my long lost daughter, which this is like around her around this area. That's her lost coordinates. That's why when they
Hmm.
crash after the desert planet, that's why that's when they first meet her. So it all kind of makes sense if you just literally put that one scene in.
Kind of.
But
Yeah,
seriously,
like make
since
a
they literally
mention of
cut
it.
it out, they're just like, nah, none of this makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So here's another thing. So well, I'm gonna do some kind of thought exercises with you, Don. So, you know all those giant, on Exegol, right? The giant Sith planet that Palpatine is, amassing his giant, army of, star destroyers everywhere. Who do you think is piloting those star destroyers?
Um,
Just have a guess.
I don't know, some sort of aliens. It looked like, I don't know. There's little things in the crowd. You know how like there's those things like, you know how there was
Little,
like many of them watching the whole thing going on. Whatever the hell those
oh,
things are, I don't know.
midichlorians?
No.
No, I don't know, but you're kind of right. Canonical answer is that all those ships were built and piloted by brainwashed slaves of, aka the natives of Exegol. So basically, Palpatine came to this planet, killed and enslaved all the people, and then got them to build all these massive ships, which they're then piloting. So the thing is, towards the end of the film, during that entire battle, they're basically killing off brainwashed, natives of the planet. And that's something that you don't know in the film because I just assumed it was just a bunch of like, I guess, space Nazis.
Or
Um,
something like that.
you know,
Because yeah, you don't really see them, but you do see them. You're just like, what is that? You know, there's no real description of what they are or anything like that. It's just they're just there.
you kind of see him here and there, but you don't see any of him in the ship. You see like all the cuts towards like, I think that one guy who betrayed uh I forget the character's name. I don't know. All the characters' names fucking suck, anyways. But yeah, like, well, that's the thing. So, that's also a point of because I just assumed, oh, they just killed the bad guys. Oh no, they just basically genocided an entire like civilization. Well, that's the thing. All right. The next thing is about Palpatine's resurrection. So, as Palpatine was thrown off into the I guess the reactor of the Death Star by Darth Vader. Um, your average person would think that, oh, he just died, right? Like, he died, he got vaporized. Anakin fulfilled his destiny, of bringing balance to the Force, and that closes off everything. No, you're wrong. You'd be wrong, because that's not what happened. What really happened is, he projected his consciousness um, into a clone body of himself, which he had several clone bodies as backups. And just before he died, he transferred his consciousness as his original body dissipated into particles. That's what happened.
That's
It's
that's a
kind of
that's a
weird.
long way to get around it, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that he projected his body into a clone, right? But the thing is, like, why does his clone look all feeble and disabled and shit? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what about all those clones from the Clone Wars? Like, they weren't all feeble and weird looking. It's kind of weird. Um, but just as a follow up, right? So Rey and we kind of know about Rey and her parents being missing. Well, guess what? Ray, Ray's father, is actually a clone, or the very first clone, of Palpatine. In fact, it's Palpatine's imperfect clone. It's his first clone, and it's imperfect because it didn't have any like force powers. It didn't have any, and I don't know, it wasn't good using a lightsaber probably. And yeah, it didn't really look like him either, or some shit like that. And so subsequently, it was considered a failure. Now, somehow, this failure of a clone managed to escape Palpatine's grasp, flee, and then start a family, and then have Rey, and then subsequently get abducted and killed and all that.
So
So
not so smart
really,
after all. First of all, and I think like actually is quite smart if they can escape Palpatine, for example. If
no,
Palpatine he
right,
can enslave a whole country, I mean not country, whole freaking
well,
planet,
galaxy,
and
yeah,
then on
exactly.
top of that, like it just really doesn't make any sense. Like logical, like I just like okay, it kind of makes sense,
Well,
but still, but why? But why?
okay, but here's the thing, right? If he's like a imperfect clone of Palpatine that doesn't have any force powers, how given that Rey obviously doesn't have any like grandmother, you know, so like how does she have such a strong force connection?
That is true.
Because
That is true.
you know,
Maybe
like
I don't know. Maybe for some reason the genes didn't awaken or something. I don't know. It's one of those like
midichlorians, it's
things.
midichlorians, it's not genes, it's midichlorians.
Yeah, the
The amount of
midichlorians,
midichlorians.
guys.
But yeah, it's like that's also weird. So just as a final nail, so not only is Rey um Palpatine's granddaughter, she's also Palpatine's daughter and maybe uncle, because there's like a second clone body. You know what I mean, right? So it's all sorts of weird. It all always gets weird.
No wonder they
And
didn't actually put this anywhere in the movie, because like it would just be
mm,
like, we have to give you a massive info dump of what's going on with this whole thing.
oh, yeah, and that movie was already a massive info dump as it is. And finally, just like as the last piece of news, Kylo, brings Rey back to life, and Rey's like really happy, and they make out and shit. But according to the novelization, um, the passionate kiss was just completely platonic. It's a platonic kiss. That's it.
There's
It's
probably
very
better
weird.
ways to transfer life forces or whatever the hell it was, but
Well, I mean, it wasn't even life force that they were transferring with that kiss. It was just like, oh, like, well, clearly they're just trying to put like shovel in like a romance plot, because there's a lot of, what is it, Raylos, like, the shipping people, right? Like, they're like, oh, it's gonna be Ray and Finn, or Ray and Kylo, or whatever. But like they kind of put that in to kind of give those people something, but then in the novelization they're like, no, 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 it's not anything. You're reading into it too much. We're not really committed to anything in Star Wars. Please like our stuff though, right? Like,
I feel like a lot of this novelization seems like a massive backflip, where it's like, because obviously it got released way later, and now it's just kind of like, yeah, Palpatine was not really the same Palpatine, so then it doesn't undo like Vader's sacrifice, so you can stop being angry at us because of this. Like, I feel like everything Star Wars has been doing in the past like 4 or 5 years has been backflipping. Even just with Episode 8, with Episode 9, it's like, yeah, forget about what happened in that other thing. It's clearly
mhm.
there's no vision and no story there. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's the problem that we saw with JJ all those years, where he's good at starting a story, but never having a middle or an end.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. And the weird thing, once again, is Disney is pulling like ideas out of like the worst part of the Star Wars like Legends universe, right? Like nobody liked the whole Palpatine clone saga, right? Like nobody liked it because it's, again, it kind of undid the whole thing that they tried to do with episode 6, and just like the original trilogy in general. So in the end, it's very weird that they decided to take on that particular, I guess, mantle. And just as a final thing, so Rise of Skywalker, which is in its 12th week of release, more or less, it still has yet to outgross Joker. So Rise of Skywalker made, I think it's, wow, that's actually a lot of zeros. Like 1 billion, yeah, 1 billion 700, sorry, 73,947 or some shit,
But
right?
that's still
Uh,
very freaking low.
Yeah, like, for something like, for the joke, whereas, like, the Joker made 1,074,000,000, right? So 74, yeah, 74 million. So that's the thing. So it's beating it by about a million, more or less. And yeah, but within the same 12-week window. It has some potential of maybe either meeting or beating The Last Jedi, which is going to be even more crazier. And people are just going to be like, oh, fans fucking like, shitty movies. But again, it's one of the things where The Rise of Skywalker was, sorry, The Last Jedi was so bad that it ruined the entire Star Wars franchise.
Yeah,
It
but that's the thing. They don't admit it though. They haven't admitted it,
yeah.
and I don't think they can admit it. Where they're just like, we stuffed up. Correct these things. It's all about optics for them. So, but not optics for fans, but optics of this select small individual group. As mentioned before, with someone like Kathleen Kennedy, she's made so many mistakes. And someone like Bob Iger even stepped down from Disney, but whoever else is in charge is going to be basically being like, we officially cannot fire you because you're so high up in the chain. You have to kind of be like, I have to step down. Essentially,
Hmm.
this is what's going to happen. At some point, either she's going to get a review contract and we're all doomed, or what's going to happen is she's going to be like, I'm going to step down and name my successor or something like that, and that's going to be it. But
I, I,
essentially,
I,
everyone knows that you stuffed up. Even my dad, who loves Star Wars and has seen every single Star Wars film in the cinema, has not seen Episode 9. It just
wow.
hasn't. It's just one of those things where it's like he even doesn't care.
Is what is it because he's just lost interest in it?
I have no idea. It's just not
Yeah,
as captivating as like obviously the original, and that's the thing.
yeah, fair enough.
He watches probably Episode 4, 5, or even 6, like probably like once a month. He just puts them on because it's one of those
Mm.
things where it's like, I want something to watch. I'm gonna watch this movie
Yeah,
I know
watch
so many
something good,
times. You know.
watch something familiar. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I mean that's just to say Star Wars. We'll just have to see whether or not they, I don't know, make up for all the. He's like, I don't know. I'm
Like
giving up,
that's the thing.
man.
I'm so sick of talking about Star Wars because it's always negative. Aside from like Mandalorian, and like everything
Yeah,
else, it's like, oh yeah, Obi-Wan's gonna be cool. Delayed because of these reasons. It's like,
yeah.
can nothing run
The-
properly in this thing? Even like I haven't watched Clone Wars yet. I think that
mm.
with like
Oh, I haven't watched it
three
either.
episodes in, I want to watch that at some point. But still, like,
Mm.
I'm hoping that's good. You know?
Yeah, like the only thing that there was the Mandalorian movie, sorry, TV series, and there was also the game that came out, right? Like Jedi Fallen Order.
Mm-hmm.
Like those two games, sorry, media pieces were the best thing to come out of Star Wars in like the past, I don't know, time that Disney has had control over
Basically,
it.
yeah, like all of
Yeah.
Disney's control. Yeah.
I mean, Battlefront wasn't that great. I played some of the Battlefront 2 like campaign that was awful. But the online's okay, so that kind of makes up for it. But that's what I'm saying. Like, with Disney, like it's not something that I'd like recommend people. Oh, please get this game, or please watch this movie, or you should watch this movie. Yes, it's like it kind of sucks. I love Star Wars. Growing up, I used to get like Star Wars Lego and stuff like that. Of all the machines, I had like Jabba's palace. I had like like in episode 2 how they had the clone ships. I forget what they're called, but like they're like these big ass ships that like deploy all the clone soldiers and stuff. I had like
Yeah,
one
like
of
they're
those
like
that I
dropships,
built.
basically. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, drop ships. Yeah, I had one of those. Like I had like what is it? Jango Fett's Slave One. I loved all that shit, and I had all that stuff. But it sucks to see that Star Wars has kind of gone in this direction where, yeah, like they're just making meh shit. I might play that. What is it? The Star Wars Lego game that's coming out because that's got like all, or has it come out? I don't know, but like it's got like all 9 episodes in like one game. Like that might be like worth the money to actually play because I did like the Lego Star
Yeah,
Wars
the
games.
Lego
Those
Star
are
Wars
pretty cool.
was yeah, definitely all right. You know.
And also since like Lego kind of do this thing where they just like basically remake the entire movie in like a Lego format, so it's kind of humorous because like I played a little bit of the Lego Lord of the Rings, and yeah, that game is like basically like a play-by-play of the movies. It's kind of crazy,
Yeah, no, and
you know.
add little like extra humorous bits where it's like, okay, making it kid friendly and things like that, or
Mm,
even just recently, because yeah, the Lego brand is so huge. It's not even just about the movies because there's like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones. Basically, nearly every single big thing like franchises had like a Lego game. Even like for example, they just recently announced there's some sort of collaboration with Nintendo with a Mario Lego game. So like at some point they'll show
yeah,
that off.
like a game. Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, maybe it's a game, right? Like, because it could easily be like a Mario Lego set instead.
Like in real
But
life, because it makes sense. Like,
yeah,
why would you make a Lego game, Mario thing if it's already a game?
yeah. But at the same time, I could actually kind of imagine there being a Lego game too, right? Like in the sense that it wouldn't play like, I guess the traditional Lego games. It would just be like a Mario game using Lego pieces to represent like Goombas and using Lego pieces to represent like the world and the hills and whatever. Maybe it's 2D, maybe it's 3D. I don't know. Maybe they go first person. I don't know. Whatever it may be. The point is like it's just going to use like Lego as a medium to like explore the genre. Like, very similar to like, maybe how they have stuff like Paper Mario, right? Like or like Yoshi's Woolly World. Like it's just like the kind of look of the game looks different, and they're just partnering up with Lego because it's like a good brand, and maybe that might be a mechanic where like Mario can build shit and then also like fly a plane or something to get to one place. We'll have to see going forward if that is actually the case.
Or maybe it's an animated movie or something of Mario with Lego. Who knows?
Yeah. But speaking of things that aren't uh, child friendly, um, I finished watching Castlevania season 3. And yeah, it came out like this week, and yeah, it's just like a continuation of I guess the Dracovania, Castlevania,
Dracovania.
Dracovania, games, or like, well, the season as a whole. It's like set like 1 month after the events of season 2. It's definitely a much more scaled down season, because obviously last season is just Dracula kind of like trying to kill people and then trying to
Try to
stop
like
him and
enslave
stuff.
humanity, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this is just kind of more small scale, just trying to see like the world of Castlevania, and then people trying to find Dracula or like bring him back or something like that, or like still fight against them. It Yeah, to be fair, like I felt like this season was very weak, and I think that has to do with um just like maybe it's just they just don't know what direction they want to take it. I feel, because this is the longest season. This is like 10 episodes, but I feel like it's done the least, if that makes sense. I don't,
Well,
because you've
that's the thing.
watched a little.
I've only watched like four episodes so far, and it's like
Mhm.
at the current moment, I still feel like they're setting up a lot of different stuff where it's like you've got the Belmont and the lady in the town
Yeah,
figuring out what's
Cypher,
going on with
yeah.
that. You've got I forgot the guy. Yeah, you've got the guy in prison from last season, dealing with the
Hector, yeah,
Hexa. Yeah,
Hector.
and so there's like two or three different storylines going on at the same time, and I'm
Yeah,
very wondering
yeah.
where they converge, if they do converge in this season.
Oh, is it? And look, this isn't much of a spoiler, but there really isn't like too much of a conclusion of it. Like it's almost like it's setting up for season 4. And that's kind of frustrating because there's like 4 main storylines. There's like obviously Cypher and uh Trevor Belmont. They're kind of dealing with like a town that's like, oh, not everything is what it seems, and so they're kind
Like
of,
kind of like a church cult kind of sounds like
yeah,
or something
church
that's going
cult.
on.
Yeah, yeah, more or less. And it's like, oh, is it corrupted? Who knows? You're kind of dealing with another storyline, which is what is it?
You do have Alucard and
Yeah, Alucard. Yeah, Alucard and the Japanese
people.
students
Yeah.
trying to learn about more about like being like vampire hunters. That storyline's very, very disappointing.
Is it just because they're probably just because they're just like, oh shit, we have to have Alucard because Alucard's Alucard, so we need to do something about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, I think it would have been better. Okay, here's the one thing that's kind of weird about the show, right? Like, so in in Castlevania, and I think they do a really big disservice to like the actual character of Dracula as well. Like, Dracula's like not really supposed to be like a good guy, right? Like and they obviously this is like the, I guess, like the Netflix cinematic Castlevania cinematic universe, right? Or I guess animated universe. Dracula was always kind of like a bad guy, and his entire history is kind of linked with the Belmonts. He basically kills like the first Belmont's like love of his like the like love of his life, and tricks the Belmont to kill a really, really powerful vampire, to which the original person who's Dracula, like whatever Tepes, he like gets that vampire soul and then becomes like the living embodiment of like evil, like the Prince of Darkness, like the he's supposed to be like the baddest thing around. Like he's not supposed to be this like mopey dude, and if he is, he's only doing it because like he can, kind of thing, not because he's actually scared or if he's like lost his edge. He's just like pure evil. Whereas the kind of TV shows kind of like makes him a more, I guess, relatable bad guy, I guess,
Yeah,
because like
he seems
obviously
like, yeah, he's more
his
attached
wife
to someone like, for example, like
his
his
wife
wife, for
dying, yeah.
example. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
that's the thing that it's like ties him to, I guess, humanity, and
but I
making
think it
him, yeah.
subsequently, makes him like a lot more like, because it's like now they're kind of moving on to like the bad guys in this are like the Four Sisters, which is just like, I don't know, very uninteresting. Like even like all the stuff with, um, the four, like those Four Sisters. One of them that's from like the previous. So I think like Carmilla, she's like kind of like the big boss of it. She's kind of like whatever. Like in, I think like in the game lore, she's like everybody who's like an evil character basically bends to the will of Dracula, right? Like even other vampires, like because he's so powerful. And Camilla's the one character within Castlevania who is so powerful that she kind of rebels against Dracula, and that's supposed to just show how powerful she is, but she doesn't really hold like a candle to him. She kind of is somebody who comes about because of the power vacuum that gets left behind because of like the disappearance of Dracula, who, when he dies, revives 100 years. That's just like the natural kind of reviving cycle of becoming this powerful entity that he becomes. Like that doesn't exist in the show. Obviously, they're trying to like maybe expand like what's the bad guys in this universe, etc., etc. But yeah, like just their kind of storylines, and like one of the characters like basically tries to seduce Hector into working with him. You see like a little bit of that happening throughout the season. It's just like a very boring thing, and again, like in the end, it doesn't really push the plot forward, and it's almost like you're waiting for what's happening next season, right? And maybe that's the thing, like they're just trying to hang like a bit of a treat for you to follow into next season. But again, it took 10 episodes, whereas like there was a lot more going on last season by comparison,
Yeah, I
right?
feel like this is like the middle ground type of thing where it's like it's building up for like another climax type of thing where
Yeah,
it's
but
like
when I
ups
say
and
middle
lows.
ground,
Yeah.
like I think the one thing that the show does benefit from is the animation's a lot better. Like the fight scenes are a lot better. Even though they are very limited, the fight scenes are pretty good when it's like, I think like especially when it's Cypher and Trevor, like all their fight scenes are excellent throughout the show. Whereas
Did
I
they
think
do?
like
Do they do what they did last season? Have a Castlevania music playing when they have some of the action scenes?
um
Because I think that's the one
probably
thing
they did.
that I think the show's lacking is that the games have a very good sound. Like pretty much every
Soundtrack.
single game has a
Well, I
really
mean,
amazing soundtrack that gives it a good like vibe. Like a really
mhm.
good Victorian era, like really scary monster vibe. And I feel like, yeah, the show
Well, I
doesn't
think
really do so much of that.
well, I think even then, like I think they only had like in the previous seasons, they only really had the like the classic Dracula like boss battle music like when they were fighting Dracula, right? Like that was when
Hmm.
they had that particular thing. So they probably did. I just probably wasn't paying attention too much about it because again, like the animation for the fight scenes are a lot better. Like they seem very choppy in the previous seasons, even though like the setup are pretty cool. They're just a lot better, and it's also you see like a lot more of like Cypher and Trevor kind of growing and like kind of being close together. They're always great, and their interactions are excellent. Again, I think like they kind of without like spoiling it too much because you haven't seen it, or I feel like again with Alucard's storyline, like it's just like they just wanted to give him something to do,
Uh-huh.
whereas the reality is they should have just put him to sleep and then not have him play a role until like they maybe adapt the I think it's like is it Symphony
Symphony
of
of the
the
Night.
Night? Yeah, like they should just have him be there for like Symphony of the Night, like when they want to adapt that storyline, that's when they should like bring him about again. You know.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I don't know. I saw maybe some article, but I don't know if it's true or not. But it might have
Mm.
some sort of like Konami, cinematic universe where there might be Devil May Cry anime or like another anime, because Devil May Cry already had an anime, but maybe Devil May Cry is a thing. Is that true, or is that
Oh,
someone being like, oh, I wish for a Devil May Cry thing,
if there's a Devil May Cry person in the
or
game,
something, or maybe linking like connective tissue? I don't know.
oh God, I'm not. I like again my Devil May Cry lore is very bad, so I would probably be the worst person to ask in regards to that.
But yeah,
But maybe
either
watch
way,
the rest of the
it'd be
show. But
cool.
maybe you find out. But yeah, like overall, I think like it's kind of like a pretty disappointing season, and I think like uh oh yeah sorry another person who I totally forgot was Isaac, right? Like Isaac's character um is kind of like a dude who's like going around and he's kind of he wants revenge for Hector, who was the other forge master, like the demon for like they basically can like forge demons, and only humans can forge demons. That's why the vampires want them on their side. Like the only person who could kind of like, I guess in the original Dracula, Castlevania lore, like Dracula basically commanded the armies of the dead. Like their souls would rend and follow his will, right? But with Isaac, he's kind of like, oh shit, well, I'm gonna get revenge on Hector, and so his whole story is, oh, he's gonna go across the world and try and find Hector, and he comes across a lot of characters who kind of you like either hate him because he's like basically has a bunch of giant like grotesque demons following him, and he's just like, oh look, let me pass through your village or whatever, like I won't hurt you. And they're just like, no, fuck off, like we don't believe you, you have some kind of weird ass like demon behind you. And then he gets upset that they don't want to let him pass. It's just really weird, like
Yeah, I pretty basically
you
just
know what I
watched that
mean.
scene. Yeah.
And then at the same time it's really weird because like again he's religious, um and again he thinks he's there to like bring again again it's supposed to do like a contrast between um religion and what is good and what is bad, right? And so he obviously is like he's crazy because he's like, oh well, I'm doing God a favor. Oh sorry, I'm doing God's will because I'm bringing back the dead because of like a passage in like a holy book or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, I get it. It sure, but it's like, can we just like actually get to the point where you're fighting things and doing cool things? Like the one thing that he does later in the season and towards the end, like it's not really that interesting. And you'll understand, like maybe once you finish watching it, we can go more deep dive into it. But it's just very disappointing what they're doing with his character, because I didn't mind his character last season. It's just like they're not doing anything interesting with him. So yeah, those are like the main four stories with him. Like yeah, I hope it doesn't demotivate you from watching it. But like
Nah, I
yeah,
might as well,
it's
because what, it's like a 2.5 hour commitment. Like, I'm already halfway
yeah.
through, so I might as well continue it on. And, as I've mentioned many times before, I really love the Castlevania series, not only games, but, like, I feel like the world's really awesome and amazing. So, and I'm happy to at least support it and to see what's going, because, like, I guess Netflix is doing a lot of different anime type of stuff as well. And yeah, and it's really cool to have like, this is also a video game adaptation, even though it's not a direct one-to-one. It's just in the world and has certain characters. But I'm still glad that at least the name Castlevania is still out there, because I think game wise, it's basically dead. So this is the only thing we have from Konami that's like Castlevania wise in the past years really. So it's kind of a
Yeah,
sad state of affairs.
that's true. Well, look, at least we still have Bloodstained coming. I think there might be like a sequel coming out because of the success of like the first game. So at least we'll have like a Castlevania-esque game coming out in the future. So I guess that's something to look forward to going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Now something that we've both watched is Altered Carbon Season 2. So so for people who don't know about Altered Carbon, it's basically a show about it's like it's set in like a cyberpunk world. So like kind of postmodern universe where people use kind of mechanical augmentations and to enhance themselves and the whole and they're able to replicate their consciousness into what's known as a stack, which is at the back of your neck, and that basically gives people immortality so long as your stack is intact. If your stack is intact, you can just go into like a different body called a sleeve. And so after the event of the first season, where Takashi Kovacs, who is the titular character, he's an envoy, which is essentially like a super soldier, more or less, designed like trained to like in harsh environments and shit like that. You watch the show and you'll understand. I don't want to give every
Yeah,
but it's kind
it
of
does have
dealing.
an interesting world and how like different personalities, I guess, come across.
Yeah, and then in season two, it's kind of set after 30 years from the. I didn't know this until I saw like a summary for it, but yeah, like
Yeah, I didn't
30
even
years
know it was 30
after.
years either.
Yeah. So it's set 30 years after the events of the previous season, which kind of makes sense because like time's all kind of relative when you're immortal, you know. And so it's 30 years after that particular case. And Kovac, he kind of gets offered a job, and kind of gets killed, and then wakes up in the body of like a new sleeve played by Anthony Mackie. Now, initially, I was a bit hesitant when they decided to kind of go towards like a new actor playing the role as Takeshi Kovacs. So I kind of really liked, I think, Joel Kinnaman.
Joel Kinnaman, which is surprising
Yeah,
because like he doesn't really do much, but he did. I think he delivered the role really well in Altered Carbon.
yeah, and I think, and that's the thing, like Anthony Mackie. Well, and I think ultimately, I think the reason why that's the case is, like Takeshi Kovic's a little bit of like a one-dimensional character in a sense. Like he's very much like straight to the point when he talks. Like he's like very stern when he talks to people, or he'll give like a very rude, standoffish attitude. But then like with people that he's like open with, he'll just like make like a snide joke, but like still keep his composure. So like that's kind of, I guess, easy to replicate. But I think they both do a good job, and especially for Mackie to kind of continue the consistency going from season one to season two, because it'll be interesting to see whether they just move forward with having a new actor play Takeshi, which is probably going to be the case. But
Yeah,
we'll
I
have
think it's going to be one of those things where like
a
each
new actor
season
every
there's going to be a
season.
new actor playing it, which is kind of cool, and it kind of makes sense for I guess the world that they kind of built, where it's like it doesn't matter what body you're in, the personality is kind of the same. So that's what I find
Exactly.
really interesting. But
Um,
yeah, if we
yeah.
want to
Sorry.
if we want to definitely deep dive into season two,
hmm
I think this season is I would say a step down from season one. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
because
The one
yeah, because I think the first season obviously it had to establish tone and also the world
the
that's
world.
in, and I feel
Yeah.
like this is what's severely lacking in season two, where like
hmm
aside from a few things, this really could have just been set in modern day world stuff, and it would have been like exactly the same type of plot. And like I feel like it's missing that like really cool environments, cinematography. That it's like this is a cyberpunk world. Even just some cool action. There is some cool action in the show, but it's like it very much this could have just been replaced to normal like guns, for example. There's nothing too I guess cyberpunk about it, per se. So it kind of loses
Well,
it. To me, it loses it on that structure, really.
I think my problem with it is, well, I think it's still cyberpunk because I think like a lot of the stuff that it uses is still like, stacks are a main thing. Human augmentation is a thing. Like, Takeshi's got like a new highly upgraded like body and stuff.
Yeah, you've
I
got
think the problem,
The Edgar Allan Poe guy, like
yeah, Poe
AI from
guy.
like last season. Yeah,
Um, but I think it starts to go from being a cyberpunk show to being sci-fi, and I think that's the thing where I'm like, oh, okay, it's kind of moving away from maybe a traditional cyberpunk TV show, right? Because it's all like cyberpunk is typically about like, it's about like, corporations and governments, dictating like the world, like either like becoming authoritarian, and stuff like that, and everybody else living and surviving in like an otherwise shithole where, and especially with something like, Altered Carbon, like their world, like a life is worth nothing, compared to getting credits and surviving. Like someone's life means literally nothing by comparison to that. The one thing that I will give this season like a bit of credit for is the lowered episode number, because it is just an 8 episode season compared to like a 10 episode season. But I think the problem is that the show still kind of feel like it dragged on. Whereas I don't feel I needed to watch like a recap of what happened in the first season because a lot of stuff happened.
I feel like the
But
last 2 episodes of like the last season, I do remember that was chock full of random like stuff. I'm like, oh god, like I do remember there was a lot because I do remember like what the last episode, when it had what it to Kovac and his
sister, yeah.
sister, they had like a good like exchange for about 20 minutes of just talking. So there was a
Mm.
lot of like I guess philosophical stuff going on as well of like
I think
different
I think
opposing views, and you don't really get this in this season, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think at the same time, like, there isn't that you know there isn't a big like little man versus the elites thing this season. Like, there's a little bit of it, but it's not as prominent. I was wondering, what did you think about like Poe's storyline throughout the season?
Well, that's the thing. I I thought it was okay, but I think it's one of those things where Poe was kind of shoehorned in a sense of like he I think he was a relatively fan favorite from the first season. So they're probably like we need something with Poe to come back. Um, and I guess it's like him because essentially with this season is he's malfunctioning. And there's this whole thing of like he needs to wipe his memory more or less to kind of like get through things. But obviously, if he wipes his memory, there's no memory about this whole thing. So it's kind of like a catch-22 type of stuff. And I guess it's
Yeah.
him trying to find himself in a sense where it's like he needs to I forgot what the guy's called, but he needs to find the guy to fix him almost. And that was kind of going on. And
Yeah,
then
like essentially, it was trying to find like a guy, like I forget, like the one of the founders of
he's
the
one of the bad guys in the CW shows.
yeah, exactly, yes, correct. I forget his name. He's actually a really famous
Yeah,
actor.
yeah,
But anyway,
he's a really good nice guy. But yeah, he's got that. And then I completely forgot until his storyline of the girl who was in Riverdale, her whole thing, Lizzie and
oh right, yeah,
her whole thing.
sure.
I completely forgot about her whole stuff because that I think season 1 there was a lot of moving parts, and I feel like in
Now that
season 2 there's not so much. It's very much one big kind of through line, really.
yeah, actually, funny that you mention it. I think actually a lot of people from I guess CW on the show. I think the character who's from um Luke Cage, Misty Knight. I forget her name, but she's the one with the cool cyber brain. Her dad is Martian Manhunter's dad in the Supergirl TV
Hmm.
series. So I kind of found that really funny. It's like, hey, aren't you on a different show? But yeah, it's funny when you can recognize people from shows. It's just really weird to see him on a Netflix show, I guess. But yeah, I kind of found. Look, here's the thing. I kind of found Poe's storyline really distracting because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be about AI learning about like life, and if he reboots, that's like him quote unquote dying, and it's supposed to juxtapose with the fact that humans have humans die, but obviously in the world they have like unlimited, they don't die, and so to kind of contrast with that. But to me, it's more like it's just a fucking AI. To me, I don't see it. Like, I get it. I get that you're supposed to kind of
It's supposed to humanize the AI. That's
yeah,
the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah. I get it. You're supposed to anthropomorphize the AI, and oh, it's so human-like, but it isn't. And in the end, like, not even Takeshi kind of treats it like a human, but kind of not. But in the end, it's kind of a focal point for the show because it essentially, because he acts the way he does, they obviously get into trouble, and it leads to a lot of issues as the season progresses. So by him not resetting, that does result in like forced drama kind of thing. So it really doesn't seem very organic to me. Like, and especially when you saw that, I think like when Takeshi, the second Takeshi, spoilers, is in the season, he interfaces with one of the AIs and is like, okay, this AI is resisting. I'm gonna like override it like several times. Like, there should have been that kind of thing done at some stage. Like, why not? Like, I just found it very distracting from like the main plot. And then
Well, that's
I
like
think I
well, going back from the second Takeshi stuff, I feel
mm,
like moving forward, the actor who's playing that second Takeshi, aka the I guess original Takeshi, um,
Yeah, yeah,
I like him so far, and hopefully I'm assuming he's going to be in the third season. So it's
yeah.
like I and also like the juxtaposition of having I guess two of them. Um,
Yeah, and how it's like obviously that'll be a conflicting thing that happens in the narrative going forward. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that that's a really cool narrative I guess point that I guess you don't really see much of I guess, and I really
Mm,
liked how they framed that I think
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like well, I mean, it's kind of like that Will Smith movie, but better, right?
with Gemini Man.
Yeah, Gemini
By the way,
Man.
I did watch that like a few weeks ago. I think it's actually a
Oh, is it
pretty good movie.
pretty good movie? Well, there you go.
It's shot
Um,
very differently, but it's I think it's just a lot of people just because of the special effects that everyone was like, yeah, that's not really Will Smith, so leave me alone with your weird face, Will Smith. But still,
okay, yeah,
I think
because
it's
it's like
I think it's
de-aging
worth a
tech.
watch, guys. Yeah,
Okay. Well, it's on Netflix, isn't it?
probably. So
Yeah. So yeah, and that's the thing. I think like there's that. There's also I think that the character's name is like Treya or Trey. And she's basically the woman with like the cyber brain or whatever it may be. And essentially there was like her plot with her missing brother, but I just found that like her missing brother also being connected to, the revolutionary leader being like revived. I just felt that was like way too convenient
yeah,
in terms of
that's a part
connection.
I
You know
didn't
what I
really like
mean?
at all. Yeah.
It's like I get it, and it's like I could see like they were all. It's like everything was wrapped up too neatly as a bow.
Oh
Like you
yeah,
know
as
what I
well
mean?
as
Like
yeah, the rest of the season, even like the Colonel character,
mm,
she was like one of the I guess one of the main antagonists of this season is very kind of like yeah, it just wraps up so like I guess perfectly with him as well, and
that's true.
and
I think I think
I thought there would be more of kind of like since Takeshi and everyone knows each other, they have that personal bond. I thought there would be more kind of things of just like hey I know you, you
and
know me, type of thing. You don't have to do
yeah.
this, all that type of stuff. But they don't really do. You don't really go through that path.
Well, yeah. Well, I think they just wanted to have like a big fight at the end, and I think that was the worst part. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have Danica get killed, the mayor or whatever. Sorry, spoilers. She gets killed, but I don't know. She's kind of like a whatever character, anyways. Like she's like this rich social elite in in the show, but she's kind of like plays secondary as like a bad guy almost. For most of the show, so to speak. But it's like, yeah, there's that. I don't know. It's kind of all over the place. Like the thing with Treya and like um, her characters just kind of fit in with everything just because she's also a bounty hunter. And they kind of make her come off like a psychopath in the first episode, but because she
Because
just
like
like
she
straight up,
actively, openly shoots
yeah,
people.
Takeshi in the head. But then later on in the show, she's like shown to be a lot more restrained and a lot more nicer. So it's weird. Like initially they kind of make her out to be like this cold-hearted like bitch, but then like oh, actually she has like a family and she has like a girlfriend and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like oh, okay, then why was she such like a bitch initially? Like I get it. Like so it's people have like fronts when they're like working a job or something like that. But it's just strange that she she ends up being like well conveniently she's like a good character in the end as well because they have to be in order to hang around like the main cast of people or for you to kind of sympathize with. Whereas like Takeshi, he can kind of be an asshole. That's just kind of how he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so yeah, like so ultimately and especially if you compare the like quote unquote the final fight, like the final kind of hurrah. I kind of feel like
Confrontation. Yeah.
yeah, the confrontation and just kind of like the big reveal was not as interesting as it was in the first season. Like the first season, like the big reveal is the big like Cloud9 hotel thing in the sky was basically a place where people like pedophiles went up to people who were interested in like killing people for like sexual gratification and like killing people like for real, not just like people who
Yeah, it's
um
basically like an Illuminati type of thing where like people who
yeah,
have
yeah.
like a lot of money can do whatever they want type of thing.
Yeah, it's like a big ass conspiracy, and then on top of that, a cool like couple of like fight interactions between Takeshi and his sister as well, like on top of all that. And then they had I think the Lizzie chick also becomes like a kind of cyber badass at the same time.
Yeah,
So
because
like they have like a
she was
bunch
a
of
big deal in the first season, and then she kind of disappeared in the second season. She wasn't really like, it's kind of like
yeah,
whatever.
like all the characters kind of like reappear in like some like Lizzie kind of has more of appearance in like, let's say, like her dad, or I forget the Latina detective in season
Season
one
one,
as well.
yeah.
Like they're only in like one episode as like a kind of like a person who are like in a sleeve replica for of those characters.
Yeah,
So
which I
yeah,
think is probably the best episode. I think probably in the season, where it was like some sort of like gladiator combat, and everyone from
oh,
these
and
pasts tried to haunt him, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of
hmm.
cool.
Okay, also another thing, I feel like a lot of the big fight scenes happened in the dark a lot.
Which is
And
an
I feel
easy way
like
to cover up CGI, you know.
yeah, CGI and bad choreography.
Well,
And
yeah,
I,
it's
and
not only that, but like even talking about action, I was actually about to talk about it. Since we talked about how it's moved away from cyberpunk and it's kind of moved into science fiction, kind of
mm,
almost. Cyberpunk really has that kind of like not only the grittiness of it, but like if I remember correctly, season one was pretty, I guess, dark in its way. It's described. It's like it's not only world, but like with its action, it was quite gory if I remember correctly. And I think this season they kind of toned down the violence aspect instead of it being like really brutal. I
I
think they
think the
turned it
thing
back,
is
or
like
because I swear to God, I remember some like limbs were
mm, like
broken and
ripped
stuff
off
in the
and shit.
first season. I swear
Yeah,
that like
oh well, I mean there was that one scene where like he fucking like smashes that guy's like bone out of his arm like during that whole arena fight. So there was stuff here and there, but yeah, I think it definitely was more gory in the first season. And but I think at the same time, if you kind of look contextually of what happens in a lot of the fight scenes, like everybody's like getting shot in the neck and you see like the blue spark, right? And so the blue sparking means like, oh, they've shot the stack and therefore they're real dead, right? Like that's what that means. So I think that's kind of like a way that they kind of get around of like having these like a lot of like blood everywhere, because these are like elite soldiers and they all shoot people accurately in the same spot every time. But yeah, like you have the odd stuff, which is like, yeah, maybe if I were to look at like all the scenes that had any kind of violence, it'd be probably more obvious that there's less gore, I guess. But yeah, like I can definitely agree that yeah, it is probably toned down. I was more disappointed that like a lot of the choreography and like fight scenes are like in the dark as well. Like like when Takeshi is fighting I think the kind of elder person, like that's kind of in the dark. When Takeshi's when they have the big scene where they get surrounded by all the um firing squad in that arena episode, it like all goes to black as well. And it's like, yeah, there's free shots and stuff, but that's like whatever. Like it doesn't look that cool. It's cool for like one scene.
yeah. So
Um,
that's what I'm saying. Like yeah, season one, season two have like I'd say a
um,
tonal thing, but as well as like yeah, I feel like it is a different show almost. Like I feel
well,
like
yeah,
season
you
one
see,
had like an intent like of like this is the world, this is what we're doing, and I think season two is just kind of like yeah, we're gonna scale this back a bit and kind of have this particular story play
well,
out.
well, here's the thing, right? In season two, I feel like they do a lot more um like expanding of the universe, but expanding stuff that like at least like look, I haven't read like the books or anything in Altered Carbon, so maybe it's all in there, like all the stuff that I'm about to mention, but like they suddenly kind of explain like, oh, by the way, there are all these dig sites and like all the like stacks are actually built from like an alloy based on like a civilization that used to live on this planet. And yeah, then they say to you, whoa, hold on, there wasn't like then all of a sudden you kind of realize, wait, hold on, are you saying other things used to live on this planet? And it's like, yeah, then you find out, oh, there are aliens, and then that's like a focal point of the show, like not necessarily aliens, but like like their history and their and I guess like the human civilization that then subsequently kind of becomes a civilization on this planet is directly tied to these aliens. And so I kind of feel like aliens kind of goes a little out of the vein of cyberpunk, but I don't want to be like one of those like I
purists
guess
being
like
like, oh,
pure,
I don't know
yeah, like,
about
oh,
this,
it can't be,
guys.
yeah, oh yeah, like, oh, it can't be like this. Like, yeah, obviously it can be. Like, even the cyberpunk kind of D&D game that I'm like setting up is probably going to have like elements of aliens in it, because there's nothing like, a good like cyberpunk game like involves, or like, just like a story involves like, you kind of questioning the government, right? So aliens are usually from, in my opinion, are usually through the lens of being like a government conspiracy to hide the existence of an alien, right? Which is technically kind of a point in the show as well, but it's not like everybody's living with alien tech. And that's the thing that kind of, it also takes away a lot of the um crux of like the human ingenuity aspect, right? Like if you look at a show that's very similar in that vein, like, when it's like an interaction between humans and aliens. I would say The Expanse is very similar, because The Expanse is not cyberpunk. In oh, it kind of is, but anyway,
I
it
don't think it
is what it
really is.
isn't.
It doesn't have
It's
that
more
same.
sci-fi.
Yeah, it's more sci-fi than like cyberpunk has that very like it has to. It's kind of like cyberpunk, like in its name, I guess would be like it something's going on where it's like it's high, there's a high society and there's like a low society where it's like
Well, I mean that
or like
technically
the dingy part of like and that's why yeah, if I'm more
that
thinking
that
about it
that
with the
that
expanse,
but
it's more
that
like the belters are more like that, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like the sorry, the Expanse is exactly like that in a way as well. Because yeah, the Belters are like low class, whereas like Earthers and Martians are technically the high society, right? And you're kind of dealing with the people in between. But I guess the point is like, they deal with like, they introduce the concept of like, that like aliens in the show, but it's almost like a starting point, and then it kind of expands into it. And none of their none of the human tech is derived from aliens, so to speak. Whereas it kind of gets explained later that like, oh, Stax is using like alien tech, like that special alien metal or substance, and then all the like neurotransmitters and all that. Like, the implication is by extension, like everything that humans are using from alien tech is just kind of a derivative of tech that they kind of found, right? And I don't know, that kind of, for me, that kind of takes away the human ingenuity aspect about it, which is what cyberpunk is supposed to be. But then again, like cyberpunk is also about like kind of the loss of like self identity because of the commercialization of your body, and like if you have a hand, you get rid of your hand and you get a robot hand, but do you lose your humanity then? Do you lose your humanity if you replace your heart? Do you lose your humanity if you replace your brain? And that's the part that like
Well, like yeah,
with season
or in this case, like cloning yourself in a sense of like consciousness with
yeah,
the stack.
exactly. And that's what like kind of the season one of Altered Carbon does, and I think does really well. But I feel like this season is more like, oh, by the way, there are aliens and there's a conspiracy kind of with the government, but I don't know. It's not as good ultimately. And I feel like, yeah, like I was saying before, the finale fight and stuff, like everything kind of just wraps up into a bow really neatly. I just kind of wish that they just do more of like, hey, here's some kind of conspiracy, or here's this thing that is not related with aliens. Let's kind of explore that a little bit more. Takashi's also, I keep thinking Takeshi 69. That's also
Yeah,
I'm getting really annoyed with
it's
the
basically
name
turned
as
to that
well.
now.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think ultimately, if they're able to kind of like uh keep it like more simple, because it's like this is an example of them kind of expanding the storyline. But again, if they're adapting the book or if they're doing something like that, then like, okay, by all means, just do it, do whatever, but just make it good. That's my only desire coming out of the show personally. But yeah, I think like all the other side storylines, like Poe, kind of felt like really like shoehorned in, and it's not
As I said, as
not
I
very.
mentioned, he's probably like I think he was a semi fan favorite the first season, and then just like we had to kind of bring him back in
Yeah,
one
but
particular way.
but is it, that's like what Felicity is in Arrow, mate. Like, yeah, she's a fan favorite, and then they fucking put
I
her
know.
everywhere
Was
and
she a
ruined
fan
it.
favorite? Was she even?
Yes, she was good.
She was definitely.
Yes,
I think she
yes.
was a
Season
favorite in like
two,
one season. Like yeah, season
yeah,
two,
season one and two, she was a fan favorite,
and then
and then
after that, it's like
after
faced
season
off.
two, yeah, because after season two, she ended up becoming a competing love interest for Oliver Queen, and then made the main love interest for him over what is it, the Black Canary, Diana Ladd. That's how it happened in the show. So like in the first two seasons, it's really good, especially because um, I think in at the end of season two they use Felicity as like a lie. Like Oliver lies about the fact that she's the love of his life. But then it's like they change. It's like they saw how popular it was with quote unquote the fans, and then made her the main love in. Whereas yeah, like that nobody cares about shit. Like that's the thing. Sometimes I'll agree, fans have good ideas and fans have bad ideas, and that's an example of a bad idea. And I think like ultimately it's better to just kind of go with like the source material. Like it's better to just have the author and the creative team like make their story, and then maybe afterwards then just try and expand and make a good story within the universe. I don't know if I'm a big fan of this whole oh well aliens exist kind of thing, because I don't really care about that in a cyberpunk world. I
Yeah,
care
if
more
anything,
about
you should watch the other Netflix show, which is like what Lost in Space or whatever. I've never watched it, but and apparently it's getting yeah canceled or whatever. But that's the thing.
oh,
It's one of
okay,
those
no
it's one of
idea.
those things where it's like yeah, that's probably it makes sense. Like as in like that's more aliens where it's like I don't really want to watch Altered Carbon for alien life forms. I've got so many shows
Yeah,
like that. I want like there's not really any cyberpunk shows really.
yeah, not really, and that's the thing. Like, I wanted to see the, maybe that just means that it just opens up for like another show to kind of, explore that universe. Especially since I think like, with Cyberpunk 2077 getting delayed, I think once that game comes out, people will be like, oh, we love Cyberpunk, and they'll be kind of itching to have like a show or a series, whether or not made in the universe, just like made to just kind of scratch that particular itch that people want. It's more, and the thing is like because in the world, cybernetics, I don't feel like are as kind of useful or seen in the show. Like you kind of see like, oh, we have like genetic engineering, we have like increased like healing and stuff like that, but you don't see like people with like metal arms or have like mantis blades and stuff like that. So it'd be cool to
Yeah,
see like
it's not
if
like a
they
leader battle angel where it's like oh man this is awesome.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, like some of the stuff like you'll see in like the new Cyberpunk game, like I guess one thing that they have is like what is it? Takeshi has like the magnetic hand, so he can like grab a gun from a distance. Like that's something that like is in some Cyberpunk games as like a skill or an ability to like kind of grab objects like that are metal from like a certain distance, right? But yeah, like I think in the end, like either make this story more interesting and more focused on I guess the theme of cyberpunk, I guess, rather than I don't know aliens. I didn't care about aliens.
Yes, aliens are annoying, but yeah, overall, relatively disappointing season. Hopefully, it gets
Hmm.
renewed for at least a third one, to kind of continue the story and maybe get semi back in track of, I guess, story wise and having a good story to tell. And I think that's kind of the main thing for me. But yeah, that will be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel where we stream live on the YouTube channel Marketing Movies. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill can be a cybernetic Superman in the future. But until next time, see ya.
Catch up.